travel agency, which is part of the TLG group, which includes various brands in numerous verticals, such as Club Travel, which focuses on business-to-business travel services, Safari Now, which is a South African-focused business-to-consumer accommodation platform, and Knightsbridge, a business-to-business payment solution. Next, we have Neeraj Goswami, an Associate Director at ClearTrip Group. Neeraj manages the Middle East flights business for ClearTrip. ClearTrip is one of the largest online travel agencies across India and the Middle East and is a market leader in flights. Then last but not least, we have Michael Kenney. Michael is the head of insurance at Cartroller. Cartroller is the leading business-to-business provider of car rental and mobility solutions to the global travel industry, including private airport transfers and ride-hailing services. Cartroller bring ancillary revenue opportunities to life through an online marketplace connecting their partners, customers, and mobility suppliers. So just before we get started, a note to the audience that any questions that are raised will be discussed at the end of the webinar, depending on the time available. So just a quick thank you, of course, to our panelists for joining us today. And we're going to jump straight into it. So it's been a really difficult time for the world, not only from a business perspective, but also in our personal lives and capacities. I think the uncertainty has been agonizing, to say the least, or at least personally, I can say that from my experience. Covid-19 has had an unparalleled impact on how we live our lives and in particular, how we travel. Some allude to it as the great pause of our generation. This has also had a significant knock-on effect in the travel industry. And starting with Neeraj, what have been some of the biggest challenges for ClearTrip, and how have these been managed or overcome?
Sure. Thanks, Brett. First of all, thanks a lot for having me here. It's absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for that. Look, this situation, this is pretty much a black swan event, right? So no one was really prepared, and I can't say that we were prepared either. In terms of challenges, I think two major challenges. One is obviously with respect to refunds. So airlines have held on to refunds in some cases. They have delayed refunds. They've provided credit shell. Problem is that you go to a customer with a credit shell and the customer doesn't really know when she will be traveling next, right? So she wants her money back. And that has been a major challenge for us. Apart from that, obviously, the customer queries have just spiked. They've gone through the roof. And especially during the lockdown stage, when we could not access call center infrastructure either, although a lot of it is on cloud, there was some dependency on physical infrastructure. And we could not access that because agents could not travel. So that was a major challenge. So looking at these episodes, we have taken our learnings, and one of the first things that we have decided to do is focus a lot more on customer service and try to solve these problems through a technology approach. So which means automating a lot of different processes in terms of customer service. We have done a lot of it. We are going to do a lot more. There have been challenges. Airlines, particularly when they have fair rules in terms of free text, unstructured data, it does not make life any easier. But still, we are putting a lot of things in place. Apart from this, we have taken the time to significantly overhaul our product. So this seemed to be a good time to do that when business was, practically non-existent. We had all the time in the world, so we went ahead and made those improvements. And right now, what we are trying to do is we are trying to provide as much information as we can to customers in different forms with respect to different restrictions, visa restrictions, flight schedules, cancellations, refund rules, and everything we can provide. So that's what we are doing right now.
I think you raised something quite interesting there. Obviously, from an online travel agency perspective and being an aggregator of the supply, from a cash flow perspective, I imagine that's been quite difficult. How has that been managed? And then my sort of second question to you is, obviously we had the big impact of the pandemic, which hit everyone, depending on which region you are, could be December, Jan, Feb, etc. Have you seen a reduction now in your customer service teams as that sort of eased off as everyone started moving through the pandemic?
The pressure has definitely increased decreased over the last few weeks. And like I said, we automated a lot of processes. So many of the standard queries we've migrated into more of a self-service mode. So people could just go onto the website and they could put in their trip ID and they could see what kind of refunds they're eligible for example. And on the other hand, a lot of people are calling just for the sake of information. When is the flight going to start? When can I travel to so and so place? We will try to put all those in a single page and dynamic, which is dynamic and evolving. So the dependency on customer service to some extent has died down, but nevertheless, it's still there. There's a long way to go. In terms of cash flows, obviously a lot of money has been stuck in different accounts with different airlines. But in this kind of a situation, obviously cash is king. Preserving cash is very important. So what we have done is we have realigned our cost base, and we have new expectations in place as to even when things go back to normal business as usual, the baseline would have changed. So we have aligned our cost structure accordingly, and together I think they have put us in a pretty comfortable cash position. So that is how we're managing it.
Thank you, Neeraj. And Paulina, from your perspective, how has the impact been on travel start, and how have you managed to overcome that?
Well, I think the first phase, what happened was obviously the chaos that erupted when this all got announced, and it wasn't a massive single dump. It kind of came in phases, in ongoing waves, as each airline came up with new regulations, new rules. So yes, customer service, we had set up a war room with a multifunctional team, sending out communications, trying to manage each rule and each change as it came in during the day. So that was phase one. Phase two, after coming out of that, we realized the situation with the cash flow. Obviously, it was all about cash preservation at that stage. So checking all your cost structures, everything in terms of, what do you really need to maintain business when effectively it's ground to a complete halt. So after that, I would say phase three is pretty much the one that we're in now, which is reorganization, doing a full reorganization, and trying to align ourselves with what is effectively the new world order. So, changing, literally our entire company is moving into what we're calling internally Travel Start 2.0. So, teams, departments, much like Neeraj, we're adding a lot of automation in, a lot of process changes. But I feel that, this is not yet the end. Phase 4 is coming and it is dawning. Can already see it coming out of the woodwork. Because obviously as the airlines start flying, the ramp up is probably going to be just as painful as the ramp down, because there's a lot of vouchers out in the marketplace, a lot of customers that have been left with, suspended bookings. Now they might want to have a refund. Maybe they're not going to be happy with the massive delay in flights taking off. So yeah, it's a process, definitely. But I think we're coming out of it stronger, and I definitely am convinced we're going to come out of it better than we came in.
Thank you. Thanks, Paulina. And Michael, from your perspective, obviously doing a lot more business-to-business focus. What is the impact been on Cartula and your clients, and how have you overcome this?
Yeah, so thanks, Brett. So I think, I can relate to a lot of the comments raised by Neeraj and Paulina. Not surprising, Cartula, like most of us in the travel sector, we've really found ourselves operating under, quite challenging and difficult trading circumstances. Traditionally, Cartula would have been a profitable company and, scaling year on year. But in late March, very, very quickly, we saw sales decline globally. And this was overlaid at a time when there was a massive surge in customer refunds. So this really put a squeeze on and pressure on liquidity. And really challenges then kind of manifest themselves into two areas. For us at a corporate level, well, we actually needed to relook at our strategic options open to us to ensure the security of our company as a future and to allow us to return to normal operations. So What does that mean? Well, we turned to the market and we entered into conversations with Talbrook, who are a private equity firm co-headquartered in London and New York, for an investment. After a short due diligence process, Talbrook invested in the business and became our new controlling shareholder. So we were really excited by this opportunity it presented, because Talbrook were attracted by the strength of our people, our actual proposition, and our market-leading position in car rental and mobility solutions. And they also saw a significant opportunity to help accelerate our growth out of the business, especially as we manage ourselves out of the current COVID challenges, while investing in a company which has its own proprietary bespoke software. So, I mean, once we kind of dealt with that corporate impact on us, well, this was all at the same time when we were dealing with quite challenging operational factors. So, we were really keen at all times throughout the last 2 months that we engaged with our key stakeholders, being our customers, our partners and suppliers. Well, some of the items that Niraj mentioned, we had to ourselves. For our customers, we were seeing that huge volumes of customers who were either amending or cancelling bookings, and that in turn put particular pressure on our customer servicing as we adapted resources to deal with unprecedented inbound customer contact, across calls, chats, and the portal. Separately for our partners and suppliers who are, feeling the pain, similar pain to ourselves, we sought to create new market intelligence reports and, also provide real-time performance insights. So what we did is we wanted to share the data that we were seeing firsthand, and we wanted to use that to assist our partners and suppliers with their own recoveries, and to also hopefully call out some pockets of opportunity that we were seeing that they in turn could share.
Thank you, Michael. I think that, the general theme from everyone is really, obviously there's the operational aspect, but what's very clear, obviously, cash flows have been significantly impacted. I know that with HCR as well, we've gone through the same process. We've also had to look at the structures in terms of leaning out and really looking at how we can recover from this and look at, what positivity we can get out of COVID-19 moving into the future. So on a more positive note, as the world really starts now to gradually open up over, the next couple of weeks and what we've seen in the last couple of days, has there been a positive impact or evidence of recovery for travel bookings? And how long do we think it's going to take to get back to business as usual? If we can start with Michael.
Yeah, so I think for car rental, it's still too early to predict, what the impact will be and how long that recovery, will take us to return to more business as usual. I suppose question what business as usual could be. But I mean, where we are as an advantage is the scale of our business globally. It gives us a broad view of the industry. So we're using that to really try and identify those green shoots I referred to earlier. So what we've called out is there are 3 indicators we're adopting, to get a sense of evidence of that recovery. The first is we're using market demand indicators like Google Trends, and we're seeing the car hire across major countries is recovering at a much faster rate than flights. Now when we drill into this, one potential driver is that there's moved to more domestic-based car staycationing, where as many airlines remain grounded and customers are looking for travel options where they have less exposure to the general public, less exposure to traveling in an environment where it's in a confined space, be it a train or a bus. And, we're seeing that this is reflected in our own numbers internally, where domestic has really recently accounted for 2/3 of new reservations. So compared to this time last year, just to give context, we're only at 1/3. So, it's a big increase when the space for a matter of a couple of months. That second indicator we're looking at is, we're assessing our markets. And what we've noticed is that it's quite encouraging to see that in the US, car hire searches are now only 19% down year on year. Whereas when we look to the peak of less than 2 months ago, they were down more than 67%. So we really can see there's a softening in that deficit. Aligned with the US, we're seeing similar strong recovery in Germany and French markets. So then what we're doing is take that Google data and compare it to, what is our own experience? How are we seeing, how's that mirroring across for us? Well, we're seeing a starts recovery in DACH, France and US regions. And, stat that just came out this morning was that, for us in the US, we're seeing our 7th consecutive week of week-on-week growth in terms of bookings. So we're really excited by that early green shift. The third indicator we're looking at is lead times. And really, this is how far in advance a customer books a trip. And we're starting to see increasing signs of consumer confidence in their booking behavior. So what we've noticed is that the lead time for international travel is decreasing. And we're also seeing a pickup in booking volumes for late summer across our EU nations. So sort of the customers and the public were sort of bearing the hurt in the early start of the months, and that instead, as restrictions are relaxed globally, starting to greater confidence in making bookings for late summer, early autumn.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's quite encouraging, particularly in reference to the US and EU, because I imagine a lot more of the market globally will follow suit. If we move the question on to Iraq, particularly on Middle East and India, what has been your experience to date, and just bearing in mind the last couple of days and weeks. I know that India recently opened up flights, so I think that's quite interesting as well.
Right. Yeah. Look, we always knew that the first markets to recover would be the domestic markets, right? And that has happened in India. It's barely been like a couple of weeks, 3 weeks now. They opened up, and customer demand is now at around 30% compared to last year, which is, I mean, in terms of growth, week-on-week growth, that's pretty rapid. Saudi domestic opened up last week, and we have seen like a decent amount of demand there as well. So there was never any question about domestic demand coming back to normal, because we have seen that in China as well, right? So in China, it's back up to 95-100% now. So that's always very encouraging. But yeah, I think Michael talked about this as well, the new baseline, the new usual, that we all have to set our expectations straight that it will not be the old usual, right? Business travel will take a hit because everyone is used to Zoom meetings, and companies will not have as much money as they did. Leisure travel will take a hit as well, because again, disposable income will decrease. So like I said, the new normal will be lower. Now, question is that how much lower will it be? That remains to be seen. But if you're talking about going back to 2019 numbers, IATA, I think IATA or CAPA has forecast 5 years. We are much more optimistic. We are thinking it will be 18 to 24 months. But we expect things to settle down within the next 4 or 5 months.
Okay, thank you. And Paulina, obviously South Africa is a little bit different in terms of our lockdowns and restrictions, so maybe a little bit more complicated than other countries. What is, I mean, of course, we know that hopefully flights will open up soon, but what has been your experience, and what are your expectations in terms of South Africa and a market like potentially Nigeria?
So firstly, today is a momentous day because it is the first commercial flight has taken off today with Semair between Joburg and Cape Town. So we were sharing WhatsApp photos. I know we were like so excited. It was the first flight ever. So that was really exciting. And considering the fact that Cape Town Joburg normally has a route that services 16,000 people a day, and it's one of the most highly trafficked routes in the world. It's insane that here we are. I mean, we're celebrating, the first flights. Yeah, hopefully it's going to be the first of many. Unfortunately, like Brett said, the recovery is a little bit slower in South Africa. We're quite a little bit behind India. So we started now with domestic. International, this is where the complicated part comes in. Depending on who you ask, the optimists or the pessimists, you've got anything from September to October, which is probably the more realistic start date, to the pessimists, which are saying that international will only start in 2021, which is a horrific idea, and it's just media over-exaggerating. But I must admit, Google trend alerts have become like the bane of my life, checking them every day, like what is the government saying today, when are flights taking off? So yeah, that's quite a traumatic roller coaster. But on the positive side, since flights have been announced to start taking off today, we've seen an increase in searches of 300% week on week. So that's been doing really well. Nigeria has also had a little bit of a delay in terms of international. They were meant to have opened up already, but there's a bit of a delay. I generally am quite positive that by August we will already see international going up with regards to full global recovery. Wow, that's a more complicated question. I must admit I side very much with Niraj on the more optimistic side of things. So I think that from my side, it's very much when the vaccine will come in. So 6 months from the time that the vaccine comes in, I think we should be starting to move towards a recovery in line with 2019 numbers. But yeah, might be a little bit too optimistic, but maybe it's also the sense of the day that I'm particularly positive.
Thank you. And, you know, it's quite funny because in one of our board meetings, one of the investors said to us, just throw out the budgets and the plans for the next 3 or 4 years and start comparing yourself to 2019. And when you get back to 2019, then we start budgeting again. And I think that's probably one of the most realistic approaches everyone can take. Staying with Paulina, so I'm going to pick on you a little bit. What impact will the new restrictions being applied to travel have on capacities and ticket prices? So, you know, we've seen a lot of airlines with limited routes, their rollouts. I think there's a big fear that ticket prices are going to, you know, skyrocket. You know, we've had scary cases where people have had to pay maybe 3,000–4,000 euro for economy class tickets. What is your perspective? What direction do you think that's going to go in?
Okay, well, I mean, basically, there's pull factors and push factors on the price. So on the one side, what's pushing the prices up is the fact that a lot of the national airlines have all had bailouts from the governments. That effectively is a loan that's going to be repaid and in many cases is factored into the price of the ticket. You've also got costs for COVID compliance, which now need to be, you know, carried by the airlines. In South Africa specifically, we have a massive devaluation of our currency, which is just that added joy on top of this wonderful Sunday of happiness that we're dealing with here. We have also low price elasticity. Remember, the people that are going to be traveling are going to be the ones that are not really going to be influenced as much by price initially. So we're talking, you know, people that need to travel are going to be the first ones. And given the fact that the airlines have not seen an influx of cash and the fact that there are so many vouchers distributed in the marketplace, there is going to be a need to start kind of raking in a little bit of cash, in my opinion. So I think that those factors will all start seeing a push in terms of a price increase. On the other side, we've got IATA working on many campaigns to take advantage of the fact that the fuel price was so low to try and, you know, bring down the prices. We've got tourism destinations looking at offsetting some of the airport taxes to further bring down the costs. And low demand might land up, you know, airlines will want to stimulate it a little bit to, you know, try and, even with the lower capacity, try and fill their flights. So unfortunately, of the two sides, I do think that we are going to see a significant increase in pricing. I think it's going to ramp up a lot and then stabilize. Right now, we're seeing in South Africa prices for domestic travel at 150% of what they were last year. I mean, it's insane. But I mean, obviously that's really not sustainable in the long term. I think that we will see, though, about 35% increase in fares over the next, year and a half.
Thank you. Thanks, Paulina. I think we may have lost Niraj for a second. So, Michael, from your perspective, do you see this? What sort of impact do you think there's going to be on the car rental industry? Do you imagine that there's going to be much different pricing? And from a capacity perspective, how do you see it playing?
Yeah, Brett. So yeah, I think for the car industry, pricing, it's obviously volume's a big driver, but it's closely correlated to supply fleets. And also, I think some lessons learned in previous market downturns where rates were dropped quite considerably, and it took the industry a long time to get back to what was a base level. So I think it's too early to tell that long-term impact on pricing, but I think what we can see to date over the last 2 months, the industry, we feel the industry's reacted sensibly to not dropping prices significantly in order for that short-term boost to recoup lost business. Initially, when COVID started impacting across the Asian source markets, what we saw was prices dropped about 10% in the US as car rental companies tried to recoup that lost demand. But as COVID quickly spread globally and more markets became involved, well, then we noticed prices kind of regulated and started to become comparable year on year. So it's our view that due to consistent lack of demand globally, well, there's no reason to reduce those rates as an impact on volume becomes negligible. I think when we look forward and looking for the green shoots and that positivity, well, if I split it two ways from the short and medium term, as soon as volumes start to recover to reasonable levels, there may be initial moves to reduce rates in order to grab that market share, that lost revenue, and in turn utilize the fleet, which up to now has largely been redundant. So to start to turn cars back to being revenue generating assets. But as car rental companies start, who have up to now been forced to cut costs, close offices and fleet down during the pandemic, well, as demand starts to improve, well, then there's going to be probably a squeeze where we're going to see a lack of supply to cover demand. So we may start to see those prices starting to creep up. I think more long term, it's the big question for us and within the industry. It's whether car rental companies have both the resources or the ability to increase their fleet quickly. There's also an impact here where they're largely dependent on relationships with car manufacturers as well, who have. We've talked about the importance of government grants and airlines. Manufacturers, car manufacturers have also benefited from similar grants. So it's whether they have that appetite to fleet up quickly to previous levels, because there's also there's a cost benefit there. So I think short to medium term prices probably remain stable and slight increase as lack of supply becomes apparent. But hopefully more long term. We won't see a sharp, sudden rise in customer rates.
Thank you. I think in terms of the car rental industry, it's quite interesting from the perspective that you would see a faster recovery, obviously on the domestic side, the domestic bookings, and obviously the impact of social distancing with airlines is a little bit more difficult. I think the way people view that will also change, but it will take time. I know that, when I've spoken to friends, it's more about going on a road trip, renting a car and going somewhere rather than taking a flight. So I personally think that it is going to take time for the airline industry to get back to where it was. And, talking to the point that Paulina raised as well, the surge in prices will only be managed, from an economic perspective when demand and supply sort of hit equilibrium. So I think they're all really interesting points. We're going to move on now to the next question. And I think, can we assume from a channel distribution perspective that in particular for emerging markets, which have lagged, more maturing markets from an online adoption perspective, will COVID-19 have a significant impact on online travel adoption versus traditional channels, and in particular, the emerging markets? Neeraj, if we can start with you.
Sure. Look, every crisis accelerates a few points, right? A few things which would have taken 5 years to happen now happens in 5 weeks, and we expect that to happen with the offline to online shift. And if you look at India, for example, India is already, the share of online market is already, online penetration is already quite high. It's over 50%. But the GCC lags behind by quite a lot. UAE, it would be around 33% at best. Saudi is less than 25%. But what has happened as a result of this situation is that people who had reservations about making transactions online, like paying money online, that inertia or that reservation has been lost because pretty much everyone had to make some kind of transaction online now, right? And most of them would have realized how easy it is and how convenient it is. Like if you have Apple Pay or a Samsung Pay, or you can save your cards on your apps, it's actually pretty secure and convenient. So we expect that to work in our favor. And secondly, in the GCC, the offline market is largely fragmented. There are many mom and pop kind of stores, if you call them. So a lot of travel agents there, right, where people, unfortunately, in this situation, will have lost their money because many of them will shut down by the end of this. So we expect an increase in brand loyalty, or effectively people flocking towards known brands after this crisis. And that kind of works out in our favor because we are one of the largest brands across the markets that we operate in. So we're banking on these two factors to, drive the offline to online shift even further, especially in the GCC.
Thank you. I think that's a really interesting point you raised, the downward impact. And sadly, of course, when you look at traditional, there are going to be a lot of companies that unfortunately don't make it, and also online players to a large degree, from a cash flow perspective. Paulina, what is your sort of view and experience and an opinion, in terms of South Africa and some of the other African markets in terms of adoption? What direction do you see it going?
Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit devil's advocate here because I think that while there is definitely going to be a growing ability to book online, because now with all of us having ordered our groceries online to everything, I think there's going to be a little bit of a unwillingness to book online initially, mainly because a lot of people, the drama of the whole COVID situation is still quite fresh in their memories. So with regards to, customer service struggling to get through, being an offline agency that deals with such small volume and is much more relationship based, they were able to deal with those customers in a much more interactive way than an OTA that's so much larger, and usually there's a distance between us and the customer, that everything is managed online. So I think that during this time, when the flights are starting to ramp up, customers are going to feel a little bit hesitant to maybe move online. But I think that once that hesitation goes away, that move on to online is going to be really, really quick. So it's going to go a little bit slower before it goes really fast and moves online aggressively. Because obviously now customers are, comfortable with online booking process from, other engagements and other channels even.
Thank you. And staying with Paulina, so, just obviously the theme of distribution, there's been an ongoing trend of customers moving from more traditional online channels like desktop to mobile and app sales. With everyone isolated at home, spending a lot more time on their phones, in particular Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and various other social media channels. Do you think this is going to accelerate the movement of the travel customer base into the mobile channel? And have there been any early indications?
Well, definitely we've seen already our searches, the ones that I spoke about earlier, where we're seeing a 300% increase in searches. We're seeing a much higher split of that on mobile than on desktop. Now, is that just an anomaly that'll then kind of readjust and then kind of standardize as people move back into, outside into a booking flow? Because remember, the conversion rate is still extremely low. Customers are obviously doing a lot of searches. They're busy assessing to see kind of what flights are loaded, what's the prices, what's available. So the conversion rate is significantly lower. The split is definitely moving more onto mobile. Mobile's always had a worse conversion rate than desktop for us. So I think now the question is that conversion rate, once customers start entering the booking process, which is pretty much as of this week, really, is that going to start moving customers from desktop onto mobile? Because we've always had a high amount of searches on mobile, but we haven't had a lot of bookings on mobile. So that's the key that I'm hoping to see, that conversion rate on mobile matches the searches, because that's kind of what's was a little bit of a problem with attribution of marketing spend, that it's a little bit more upper funnel. But definitely in South Africa, we're seeing more traffic from mobile. And Nigeria, unfortunately, it has stayed pretty much the same. But then again, it's always been high. It's been a mobile-first market, so it stayed at about 75% of traffic has remained from mobile. So, but again, I will only be able to answer the conversion and the booking question once we have something to sell for a sustainable period of time.
Thank you. Niraj, in terms of Middle East and India, has it been something similar, or are you guys experiencing something different?
Look, Brett, for us in the emerging markets that we operate in, mobile has always been a very important channel. And what I mean by that is, especially in the GCC, over 67% of our bookings were coming from mobile, even previously, right? And the reason is pretty straightforward. Not everyone has a laptop or a desktop in these countries, but everyone has a smartphone, right? So we have always had a mobile. I mean, quite a few months ago, we had taken a call last year to take a mobile-first approach in terms of releasing features. For example, we did a major platform overhaul as well, and early signs that we see in India and Saudi Arabia, there seems to be significant shift, a further shift in terms of bookings towards mobile. So we are expecting that to stay, maybe not at the same level, but still we expect the trend to continue.
Okay, thank you. So there's a saying, you should not let a good crisis go to waste. I think we can all have a bit of a cough and a laugh now. To a degree, the pandemic may have leveled the playing field, provided opportunity for disruption, or may have forced everyone to reevaluate their strategies. So starting with Michael, has your strategy and the services you offer changed or evolved as a direct result of COVID-19?
Yes, Brett. So, our strategy has certainly changed, evolved, as we very much had to pivot very, very quickly to the specific challenges of COVID-19 and really put in place initiatives that will prepare us to the bounce back that we all anticipate and we hope is starting to materialize. So, I think we can, across the business, we can split this strategy into two parts. One is about kind of product adaptation, and the second is just around the demand channels. So if I take the first one, product adaptation, well, out of the COVID-19 headwind, we're now delivering a plan to adapt our existing supply products to a world where post-COVID-19 consumer preferences have and will continue to change. So in practice, we have to think, well, what does that mean for car rental? And so what we're doing, it's really about delivering sanitized cars within our sort order, where we rank, and sort order just for the audience, it's just where we rank the car offers alongside one another based on customer search preferences. So it really is where we position those sanitized vehicles in that sort. It's also about offering merchandising placements to our suppliers who are committed to deep cleaning procedures in line with the World Health Organization guidelines. It's about facilitating options like desk bypass, which could include key and go or straight to car options. So customers can avoid, on arrival at a destination and the pickup desk, avoid human interaction and more or less facilitate them just jumping straight into the car. And for us, it's also about how we can offer more customers, more information to our customers, which is within the material that we share with them. So by email, it could be, the customer booking material, the customer voucher, or even the FAQs. If I look at the second element of our strategy around demand channels, well, as has been covered off by all panelists, we're actively adapting our focus towards domestic, which is where we can see an earlier increase. And what we're doing is, in particular, in looking at that domestic route, well, it's how we split pickups between airport, which is traditionally one of the biggest drivers of car pickup, towards more downtown locations, and making sure that we're optimized for both locations typically the downtown locations being more smaller, independent run own suppliers. And what to really validate was this right strategy? Well, we've been looking at how we've been comparing year on year against downtown pickups. And we can already see a 4% increase in our downtown bookings compared to this time last year. So really for us, this is an important sign that we need to ramp up our downtown content. And then, aligned with this on our travel partner side, well, for us, there's a big focus on our CRM campaigns that we have with partners. So we can ensure that we push and support the benefits of domestic travel in downtown locations through our sales and our pricing strategies.
Thank you, Michael. If I pass it on to Niraj, in terms of your strategy and services, how have they evolved?
The first thing that we have sought out to do is definitely, improve our customer service. So we did, pretty much all we could, but obviously it was not up to the mark because, like I said, no one is prepared. But there are multiple learnings coming out of this. So like I mentioned this before, we are automating as much of the process as we can. We are putting in AI technologies like a chatbot, for example, to handle standard requests. So customer service remains a top priority. That is always going to be there. The second one is in this post-COVID environment, like I said, we have realigned our cost structure, right? So to keep our costs low, means that we also have to take care of our customer retention, right? Which means providing customers what they want. And right now, customers need a lot of flexibility. And that has been a very key aspect that we have had multiple meetings around, and we have different plans around it. And flexibility, I don't mean providing 100 different options to the customer and then letting them choose. Providing very standard options, 2 or 3 options, and being very clear with what the expectations from each are. And that is something we have embarked on doing, and we have a roadmap therein. And also providing flexibility in terms of different ancillaries, like in different insurances, right? So in addition to medical insurance, flight delays might happen because boarding procedures, cleaning procedures are going to be more elaborate now, right? So flight cancellations would also probably be more frequent. And last minute cancellations will happen because, it will probably not be socially acceptable to travel with a common cold, correct? Even if you're fine with light fever, everyone else will not be. So flexibility is definitely in need of the hour, and that is something we are exploring very, very keenly.
Thank you. I think that's a really interesting point. I actually hadn't thought about that in terms of cancellations. And I think how society is going to view everyone else. I mean, we all know in the beginning, it was kind of like when someone coughed, you were kind of like, let's shift 7 meters to the right because we don't know, is that cold or is it COVID? But I do see that trend going forward as well. So I think that's a really valid point you've raised. Paulina, maybe, a little bit more of a different spin, but how has this sort of impacted your marketing strategy? And, bearing in mind also that you've got, as I mentioned earlier on, a lot of customers are now, frequently on their mobile phone. Has this changed the way that you're looking at how you market your service and content going forward?
Well, definitely one thing is for sure, we are trying to, and this is part of our entire reorg and change in the way we want to do business going forward, is that we've started focusing a lot more on partnerships and third-party distribution. So we found a huge opportunity in the ITC B2B space. So we're going to be focusing a lot on that. We're going to basically non-B2C standard ways of distribution. We're moving kind of away from that, specifically out of the whole, burn, SEM, Google space. I think everyone's kind of like looking for ways to kind of remove their dependency from Google. So, so are we. With that, we're looking at partnerships, like I mentioned, expanding our product to have a wallet and my account, focus much more on CRM, much like yourself, Michael. Yeah, so definitely there's a lot of changes. Google Flights will remain a good partner for us. So we're doing quite a lot of development work around that to push real-time pricing through. But yeah, I think the marketing space and our marketing budget allocation is going to look exceptionally different post-COVID now. We are, those days of, subsidized campaigns, etc., that's going to very much change. So much more smarter net revenue focused channels, partnerships, much more in that space.
Thank you. And I think just a follow-up question, particularly directed at yourself and Niraj, is do you think we're going to see a trend more, for consumers buying sort of a one-stop shop, packaged travel product versus currently what we see in the environment where you're kind of picking and choosing and moving forward? And the reason why I raise this is, of course, when you're picking and choosing from different environments or even from the same OTA, you're dealing with different suppliers in the back end to a large degree. And when something like this happens, and let's touch wood and hope, this is the one black swan event of our time, or at least our generation. Do you think that's going to have an impact on customer purchasing behavior, and will that be significant? We can start with Niraj.
So by one-stop shop, if you're talking about people purchasing different products from the same supplier, I mean a hotel, a flight, and a car rental?
A packaged product that's got the airline ticket, the hotel, the transfer, everything included in it, versus a sort of where you select the different products on your own.
Correct. Yes, I think that'll. So you would want that kind of a scenario because you can ultimately you'll follow up with just one guy at the end of it, right? If your flight gets cancelled or your hotel reservation gets cancelled, you still know who you have to follow up with. And if your flight gets cancelled, you pretty much the entire package needs to be cancelled, right? So if from a customer's point of view, it makes much more sense to do all of it from a single entity instead of taking it across different suppliers. That's my view.
Thank you. Paulina, what do you think?
I 100% agree. I just think the definition of package is a little bit kind of open. So, you can have a package which is negotiated as different elements within a single deal. Or alternatively, you can have a basket which incorporates multiple suppliers, but you still have only one customer service point to kind of deal with regards to all these elements. So I think very much trying to deal with one service point is definitely something I think customers will be looking at, especially for the foreseeable future. No one wants to be on the phone for between 6 suppliers trying to deal with a cancelled flight, etc. And then trying to move their car booking and then their hotel booking, etc. But I don't think it is a traditional package, which is basically, a negotiated deal around, there's a flight and an air component, etc. So I think it's very much kind of like a self-created package, so to speak.
Thank you. I think that is valid. As a consumer, if you're booking your flights with the airline and then your hotel with someone else and then your car rental and you kind of managing 3 different distributors, it does become pretty complicated from a consumer perspective. And I imagine there's obviously been a lot of stress and frustration in the market. So I personally believe that it will ultimately result in a lot more potential bookings with OTAs and that sort of environment where you can package the different services or give the offerings in one booking environment. Then moving on, in terms of, taking into account the potential changes from COVID-19, Paulina, do you think NDCs will have a significant impact on the future of travel, or are there other options that we should consider? And for the audience out there who perhaps don't know what NDC is, it's short for New Distribution Capability, which is essentially an XML standard created by IATA to allow airline service providers to deliver richer content and ancillaries to their customers. So the idea was to standardize integration formats for different for direct connections to airlines, and therefore make richer ancillary content available. On to you, Paulina.
So I've always been a direct connect kind of girl. Like wherever possible, we want to try and connect directly, get the better deal, get the better prices, build a better relationship with the supplier, with the airline. Until COVID. That was, yeah, there's nothing like dealing with multiple partners, multiple APIs, all with different ways of dealing with cancellations from a customer. That's kind of where the GDSs really paid for themselves. So suddenly it was like, yeah, you know, and we're lucky enough to have an amazing team at Amadeus to support us and, you know, kind of worked with us in terms of a lot of our bottlenecks. And I mean, literally they were on WhatsApp, you know, support. So we're very grateful to them. But having said that, we're definitely not moving away from NDC. I think that, and not moving away from direct connects. I do think airlines are going to change their approach a little bit, because remember, with the GDSs, their cost is variable. So no book, no pay, right? Unfortunately, if you're building an entire infrastructure with, you know, with all that's required to be able to distribute yourself and manage everything on your side, those costs do not go down just because your volume goes down. So I think that given the current environment, airlines are not going to be super enthused to be able to invest funds that they don't have into infrastructure that's required to expand and make NDC and direct connection scalable for the time being. Once things normalize, because initially they're all going to have to focus on kind of filling their planes and, you know, the day-to-day business of running an airline. But once that's done, I think within the next, you know, year and a half, 2 years, NDC is definitely coming back on the table. Although I still think it's going to be in a different format. I think the old format was not sustainable. I think that between them, between the airlines and the GDSs, you know, there's going to be much more alignment. To be honest, it's probably a conversation that should have been a lot more kind of had a lot earlier, like back in 2011. But I think now they're definitely going to align a lot more. And yeah, so yes, NDC will still be a thing, not really critical for anyone's roadmap for the next 6 to 12 months, but it will be after, and probably in a different format. So I wouldn't be so keen on integrating anyone's API direct for now.
Thank you. And there's also been a big movement in the last couple of years towards virtual interlining. Niraj, do you think the impact of COVID-19, in particular, the phasing in of limited routes by airlines across the globe, will fast-track this movement?
Yeah, Brett, absolutely. I mean, by the end of this, there'll be lower capacity, and there'll be a lot of routes which will be underserved, if not unserved, right? So as frequency decreases, the value of, you know, combining different carriers to travel from route A to from point A to point B, you travel via carrier X and then you come back via carrier Y. That offers you a lot more flexibility, right? So this, we have tried this. I mean, we have done this for some time, and we actually designed a product around this, the split screen, which lets you mix and match, and definitely that has been phenomenal. GDS does this as well. But what I'm talking about is round-trip interlining. But if you talk about one-way virtual interlining, that becomes a little more complicated. First thing is that in the current context, check-in procedures will probably be longer. So that means the transit time might be longer, right? So which means if you have to check out with your baggage and then you have to check back in, the convenience is definitely takes a hit. And second,
I think we may have lost Niraj for a second. Pauline and Michael, do I still have you?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Okay, perfect. What we'll do is we'll carry on, and then when Niraj rejoins, we'll give him an opportunity to finish up. So just in terms of ancillary products, we know that they're going to gain more and more importance now. I think from both a financial perspective and also from a customer value in the post-COVID-19 world. So Michael, starting with you, are there any specific ancillary product strategies that you're going to be deploying? I know earlier on you mentioned a couple of services that you're looking to integrate into the platform. Let me just hold. Niraj, have we got you back?
I should hope so.
Yes,
Can you
we've
hear
got
me?
you back.
Right.
Yes, I can. If we can just go back to, so you can finish up, it was the complications around one-way virtual interlining.
Right. So I was talking about visas. So most of the demographics that we serve, they would require transit visas to, for example, you're going to travel to Bangladesh via Pakistan without, getting a visa. And similarly, if I'm to travel to Europe and I go via Istanbul and I need to get a Turkish visa, so that takes the benefit away, right? I end up paying the same amount and it takes up more time. So that limits the use case for one-way virtual interlining in our case, but round trip is definitely going to be extremely important.
Okay, thank you. It's something that I've had a few discussions with some of our partners, and I also firmly believe that that aspect of the travel service is going to become more and more important. Also, as the airlines roll out more and more of their routes, or if I'm a customer sitting on one side of the planet and I want to get to the other, there may be very limited options right now. So I'm hoping for the fast track movement of that. Now back, sorry, Michael, back to you in terms of your ancillary product strategy. Is there anything that you can mention in terms of what your focus is now? I know earlier on you mentioned you guys are looking at domestic and then also services, related to COVID-19, getting that integrated, within the tech platform.
Yeah, so if we want to think of our, we have a core product offering which is around car rental and mobility solutions, such as pre-book transfers and on-demand. Well, within those core products, we're always looking and focusing on ways that we can really optimize the amount of revenue we secure in each booking. And we're doing this by those ancillary products. So for us, the primary driver of ancillary revenue is insurance, which we sell as an add-on to car. So this is quite a nice, neat insurance product in that it aligns to the rental duration. So it's not an annual policy. We can merchandise this insurance product at multiple touch points within the customer funnel, as well as upsell it via emails and our Manage My Booking portal. So in really looking to grow this the ancillary stream, well, what we're doing is we're currently updating, and this has been a project which has really been ongoing for the last 6 to 12 months. We're updating our insurance roadmap in which we're identifying, looking at our existing markets, how we can improve the product we sell. So within insurance, that's offering better policy benefits. It's about better pricing of the product to the customer. It's about better policy limits in the event of a claim. And the second area we're looking at within the roadmap is about new markets we can enter to. So especially in a post-COVID world, we're seeing green shoots in Asia. We're really reassessing what opportunities there are in the Asian market, and as well as looking at the Middle East and LATAM. So we already have a good presence globally, but for insurance, it's a European and North American-centric approach, overlaid with Australia, New Zealand, and so forth. Now, moving away from that insurance stream and thinking about our core car product, well, other ancillary products we're looking at is around the selling of prepaid ancillaries. So those are products that the suppliers typically offer at the pickup desk, and which we want to bring an upfront into the customer funnel. So, once the customers pick their car, well, we're securing better content. So we can offer customers child and baby seats, for instance, up front. They have the option to pre-purchase their GPS, and also they can maybe add additional named drivers, depending on the time of year and the locations. Also opportunities for items like winter tires.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. And then Paulina, from a travel stop perspective, are there any specific and ancillary product strategies that you guys are going to be looking to deploy?
Well, we're also always looking to innovate our ancillaries. I think right now the big focus is on anything that builds consumer confidence and gives them comfort in the travel process again. So any flexible, so basically we create our own flexible ticket options. So, you'll be able to change your flights. anything around insurances to give people comfort that if one leg of the flight is cancelled or they're stranded, additional support, so 24-hour, like a special hotline where if you get stranded or something goes wrong, you have a direct line to an agent. Those are all products that right now are building, giving customers the confidence to book again. Then, of course, outside of that, we're facilitating easier payment, easier refunds because of, still dealing with the whole backlog of the COVID situation. So, for example, even all the EMDs and vouchers that have been distributed by airlines, we're creating a wallet for customers to be able to see, okay, this is how much money I've got with this airline, so they can kind of keep track of their refunds, their vouchers, etc. So, kind of pretty much on those two streams.
Thank you. And Neeraj, from your perspective?
Yeah, we're trying to do a lot of things which Paulina mentioned. And apart from that, our strategy is to have our integration with HepStar in place and let you guys do all the scouting and get us the best ancillaries.
Okay. I'm going to now move on to our last question. I think we're on the dot. So, Michael, the team at Controller has recently been working on a mobility product for your B2B partners. Can you tell us a bit more about it? I personally think it's quite interesting because there's going to be quite a big shift potentially in the ground transportation space with the customer base evolving. So if you can maybe just give us a bit of insights into that.
Yeah, so we've been looking at this area and we've been asking ourselves, the question for us is, as a B2B business, what do our B2B partners want for their customers? I suppose in a roundabout way, what are their customers asking for? And to date, our partners, they've had pretty undeveloped mobile offerings. So by that, what I mean is majority of their mobility solutions were pre-booked private transfer products, which are ordered in advance. And they hadn't yet gravitated towards that more on-demand convenience hire. So recently what we've done is we've introduced an SDK into our partners app. And for us, that's a big step forward in that, and we're passing that on, that big step and those improvements onto our partners, because that will support on-demand ride content. And as it already stands, there's good early signs. We've got 10 partners on the roadmap to go live in the next 12 months, which is where they will embed that on-demand SDK. But obviously at the moment, take-up in this current environment is just slightly uncertain. But it's an ever-changing landscape we're dealing with. Our partners see it as a gradual process where they work with their customers, and about how importantly how their customers will perceive the products they sell. So it's about changing the customer psyche and think about how we use push notifications to some mobility products. So by that, what I mean is the availability of pre-booked content, which is pre-arranged, that can be organized before the customer travels. But then what we also want to do is we're pushing notifications where customers embed our SDK so that when they arrive in a destination or while they're away, that they can order convenience travel. So it's the on-demand and it's using content, the likes of Uber or our links or My Taxi. So for this, it's about encouraging and pushing the customers along so that they see a logical association between the travel they've booked with our partners and then in turn mobility products they're looking to hire while they're away. Something we're doing is within our mobility offering, we're currently focused on that pre-book and that on-demand. We do have access, interestingly, to micro-mobility content, such as scooters and e-bikes. But what we're finding is really our partners want to first educate and embed a viable source of income, being on-demand or pre-book, before we start exploring those other options. Now, this is all in an environment where it's all customer demand-led. So all of a sudden, customers start coming out saying they've got a bigger focus towards electric solutions, scooters, etc. We can pivot around that because ultimately we developed our technology in-house. It's our own proprietary software, so it can be adapted and changed to different requirements. What we really noticed is that mobility us is a really exciting opportunity. It's a product that we're using to distinguish ourselves in the marketplace, and importantly, we're looking to offer our B2B customers here as a new key asset going forward.
Thank you. I think, it's quite interesting because you touched on the point there, the e-bikes and scooters. And I think having come out of this pandemic and the lockdown, and there potentially being a lot of domestic travel, and a lot of people have been buying bicycles, and you've got those e-bikes and sort of traveling, using that type of form of transport. So it's good to hear that in the future we may see that as part of the value proposition as well. That is the end of the questions for today. So we're going to have a quick look to see if any questions have come in. I don't seem to see what that is. If there are any questions that you would like to raise, you're more than welcome to send Uzakrota a mail, and then we can get the various panelists to respond. From our side, just a big thank you to Michael, Paulina, Niraj for taking the time out today. I think a lot of what we've spoken about has been really interesting, specifically, how everyone is managing this process, and most importantly, how positivity is really the mind frame that we all need to have, and we need to look forward. And a lot of these challenges are happening, but there's still a very strong and significant future for travel. And I personally believe that when the lockdowns and restrictions come out, travel will absolutely rebound like never before. So I think we can all look forward to that. So again, just a thank you also to Uzakrota for hosting this webinar, and to our panelists. And I hope everyone enjoyed it, and have a good weekend.
Thanks, Brett. Cheers.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Take care.